So Sunil, can you name one lesson or idea from abroad that's helped you or your colleagues?
The experience of working in an emerging market has been hugely influential in shaping my thinking and approach to problem solving. A common attribute to emerging markets is affordability, and affordability drives behaviors. For example, creativity, innovation makes you more customer-centric. The example I will quote is one from Kenya. So there was a mobile payment platform that was launched in Kenya in 2007. It was not branded fintech, but what it did was create social inclusion, and it involved using a normal, very simple mobile phone. In terms of numbers, 4 million bank users in Kenya, 17 million users of M-Pesa. That gives you, I hope, and your subscribers an idea of the kind of technologies and that emerge from these markets in terms of social impact. I believe KPMG did a study and it was 10 times the size of the balance sheet.
Right. Are there any projects or innovations from this country that might be valuable to your peers overseas?
Yes, Matt, and I think on reflection, what the UK government has done on public-private partnerships is one that we can share. Not everything in terms of outcomes have been good, but we have forensically looked at some of the mistakes we've made, whether it's PFI or in service delivery. But I think the reason I'm suggesting this is because the policy has been politically durable. Also, I think to address some of the challenges, say for infrastructure, we would need to engage with the private sector. I read the other day that the infrastructure gap is around 30 trillion globally. And if you're going to fund that, whether we believe the numbers or not, the number is significantly large. We will need to work with the private sector. So in answer to the question, it's PPP in my book. It's something we can share.
How can we improve the ways in which senior public officials work with and learn from their colleagues overseas?
So in my book, I think there's nothing like hands-on experience. But I think we need to be practical. We live in a financially constrained environment, and we have a lot of digital tools now to bring the world closer. And we have products such as Government Forum, where we can share case studies and good practice and experiences. So I would suggest more sort of webinars, more events, more conferences to exchange thoughts and ideas. But I'll go back to my emerging market theme. I think we need to look beyond the developed world, because there are lots of good examples emerging from the emerging markets for reasons I cited before in terms of the affordability and the interventions and the innovation and creativity that comes from these markets.
Okay. What do you think are the biggest global challenges in your field over the next couple of years? And we'll have to ask you to define your field as well, I guess.
Look, I've worked across a number of policy areas. When you worked in the private and public sector for over 40 years, that you cover broad areas. Two issues that are important for me. One is equality. I think we have a challenge. There's a House of Commons report which was published recently, which basically says that 1% of the world's assets, no, 2/3 of the world's assets are going to sit with 1% of the population. So it's about equality within nations and between nations. In a financially constrained environment, that's going to be a big challenge as we move forward. The other one I would raise is the impact of technology on biology. So we talk about driverless cars, we talk about internet and all of that, but I think it's going to have a profound impact on disease. It's going to have a profound impact on understanding how the brain works. And the impact of that is again going to be for civil servants on policy development. For example, how is insurance going to work? How is taxation policy going to work in that environment? So, in summary, equality and impact of technology on biology are the two ones that I would suggest.
Yeah, thank you. And finally, what's your favourite book?
Interesting question. There are several, but one that stands out is a book I read a few years ago called Wisdom of Crowds. And it's a book that I believe was written by a New Yorker magazine journalist called James, and I might be pronouncing this wrong, Soroki. And James' thesis is that crowds are much better at predicting the future than individual experts. And it's an interesting conundrum, and it's counterintuitive, as most of conundrums are. And the example he cites, which has stuck in my mind, is from the TV program Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And the statistics he quotes is that if you ask the audience, they get the answer right around 90% of the time. If you ask the expert or the friend, the right answer is 65% of the time. So an interesting conundrum and a book worth reading.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.